Right, over to you, Adrian.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning everybody. It's nice to almost see you. Hearing a bit. Are you all comfortable up there? Do you hear me? I mean, we're so spread out.
You can move closer.
If you want to come forward, you know, I don't bite.
Much.
You know,
are you sure?
Yeah, well I can. I've been known to.
Yeah, we'll do.
Well, firstly, I'd just like to say thank you very much for inviting me back to Armadacon. To my amazement, it's been 16 years since I last attended. I came to Armadacon 1, 2, 3 and 4, and I rather suspect that I will be well reminded of that before the end of this convention. And I have a lot of happy memories, obviously, of that. And I know people that will ask, and they have asked me, well, where have you been? After Armadacon 4, and not as a result of Armadacon 4, I decided that I just needed, because I'd been, every year I went to 3 or 4 conventions and travelled about a bit, I decided just to take a few years of settling down at home a bit, you know, not getting around back so much. As I say, it wasn't a reflection on the cons, because I always had a good time. I think most people who went there at the same time would tell you that, you know. So I was quite amazed actually when it turned out, when I was invited back, Dave Trace initially contacted me, tracked me down at work, and you know, it wasn't just a few years, it was 16 years. So it has been a long time, but it's lovely to come back and see a lot of people that I met before. I had an interesting journey down here as well. I'm no stranger to Plymouth, as you can see. I'm a fan of the Greens, and I had because I live in Bideford in North Devon. It's quite remote, and it's not the end of the world, but you can see it. You know, and I don't drive, so I had a fairly tortuous bus journey from Bideford to Tavistock, then a change which brought me into Royal Parade, which is familiar to me. And I thought, I'd had a bit of a recce of this place a few weeks back when I popped down to meet a few people just to see where it was and that. Not that I remembered, I knew it was in Devonport. And I said to the bus driver as I was getting off in Royal Parade, can you just point me in the right direction for the Devonport bus? I said, I think it's over the other side. He said, yeah, 2A. He said, you want platform 2A or whatever it is, stand 2A. So I got to the stand there, and there were a good few people waiting, and I said, I'm all right for Devonport, and a couple of elderly ladies said, yeah, you're all right, my dear, we'll show you where it is, and that, you know. So anyway, I got on the bus, and I got my map of Devonport, and the road, the Orbin Road, and all the rest of it, fine, no problems. And I said to the driver, you know, quite blandly, oh, just Orby Road, it's St Albans Road, please. Oh, I don't know that, he said. I said, well, you know, it's off Park Lane, I think, the main drive in Devonport. Well, I don't know where that is. I said, well, I'll go to Devonport. Oh, yeah, right, okay. He said, it's my first time on this here bus, he said, so I don't know where any of it is. He said, I'll give you a ticket to, how about going to something or other gate? He said, there was something gate and something gate. I said, yeah, that sounds about right. I said, yeah, I'll do it. £1.50 or something. So, anyway, fortunately, the two of the elderly ladies who were obviously taking a shine to me, elderly man, elderly ladies, fine, you know. They took me in hand then, and and they not only gave me exact directions how to get here, but they also gave me a potted history of Devonport and so on and so forth, which was great. So I finally got here, and I thought, that's it, I've arrived, that's great. And then the real problem started, because the lady on reception directed me to my room, and, you know, and after about 4 abortive attempts, I finally found it somewhere up on the poop deck or wherever it is. But that was great. Anyway, so yes, what have I been doing? What have I been hibernating? Well, I haven't stopped writing, and I'll talk about that a bit later on. I understand I've got to do this for about 4 hours. Is that right, Gary?
Yeah, 4 hours. 4 hours.
Right, okay. And I've got to get away for certain reasons later on. Anyway, so yes, so I have been writing, and so I will talk to you a little bit about that. At home, I mean, what have I been doing at home other than writing? I suppose I've got a rambling old place up there in North Devon, and it's got an old blacksmith's forge, and I've done a lot of work on it, and ripped ivy off the roof of this part, and done odd things with that, and built extensions for the kids and that. And I've become a bit of a born-again beach bum, I suppose. because we're not far away from Westwood Ho Beach, which is a lovely expanse of about 4 miles of sand up there. And I always, when I was a kid, I always enjoyed being in the water. I can't say I'm a surfer. I mean, it's renowned for its surfing up there, so I'm one of the few people that goes to this place and doesn't actually have a surfboard. But my son, who often comes with me, you know, we worked out that if you want to be cool at Westwood Ho and around there, not that we do, we're not that bothered about being cool, well, not in that sense. You know, you've got to carry some kind of surfboard. And you see these guys out there, and you know, they're surfing for the first time, and they've got, like, if you were going to go driving for the first time and learn to drive, you probably wouldn't learn in a Maserati, would you? You know, I mean, even I, who don't know anything about cars, no, you don't start in a Ferrari or a Maserati. And these guys have got these, you know, massive great, and they're walking around with these surfboards. I'm not sure that they ever actually go in the water, you know. And I said to Sam, my son, I said, well, hey, I said, this is all right. I said, let's get some hardboard, you know, and curve it up a bit and that, and paint some, you know, girlies on it or something, and we could walk around Westwood over these things under our arm. We don't need to do anything, you know, that'd be really cool. So, I don't know. But the thing about the surfing thing is that in all weathers, and we do get, amazingly, even this year, you do get the odd day when it's really hot, and you get a proper summer's day up there. I mean, I can't quite get used to the idea of wearing a wetsuit. I've never worn one of these wetsuits. Because I would imagine, well, if you went in and had a bath, you wouldn't put a wetsuit on, would you? You know, you have a bath because you want to get clean, I suppose. Those who go in the bath for that reason. But you also want to just lounge in warm water. Well, I like going in the sea because you know, just enjoy splashing about in the waves and having a bit of fun. So Sam and I, we just wear what's affectionately known as swimming trunks. You know, sometimes nicknamed trolleys, I think. So we're two of the few people wandering around Westwood Ho amongst the millions on a hot day or otherwise who actually got swimming trunks on. And to actually go in the water without a wetsuit is really weird, you know. There's these two weird guys again, you know. and my trunks are about, I don't know, my wife bought them for me, so she bought the least sexy trunks she could find, you know. And they're like down here somewhere. And when you go in the water, it's like having Billy Smart's circus around you. We won't go into that. Yeah, but Sam being a young chap, he's a bit cooler, which probably explains why when we go down to the beach, he usually walks about 30 yards behind me. But yeah, you know, I find often if I've been working on the roof or something, doing something hot, it's great to just shoot off down to the beach and plunge in and enjoy it. You know. As I say, with the surfing, the oddest experience I had this year was and the other thing is you can do it at the drop. If you live near the beach, you can do it at the drop of a hat. You know, so you might be doing something one day, and it's totally unplanned. You think, oh, it's a night. Yeah. I just feel like going down and have a swim. You know? Anyway, this one Sunday, it was a cloudy day, and the wind was blowing, and I knew from my tide timetable, because I read the timetables now, that the tide was going to be up. You see, so I said to Jude, well, I said, I think I'll go down to the beach today and have a bit of a swim. You know. Yeah, all right then. She said, you're going to get your own tea, or you expect tea when you come home? I said, well, I'll phone you up, and if there's anything going for me, because there's a great fish and chip shop there, you know, which is another excuse for going down. Anyway, this particular Sunday, I said to Sam, oh, down the beach then, Sam. He said, you must be bloody joking, look at it, the wind's howling, it's freezing cold, it's cloudy, there's no sun, it might even rain. I said, nah, it's all right. Water will be warm, because I've also taken, you see, to reading the, I watch old David Brain on Spotlight every night, because he always gives you the water temperatures. Yes. And I know that 15 degrees is going to be all right, you see. So I said, oh no, it's going to be 15 or even 16 degrees today. And he looked at me. I said, no, David Brain said it's going to be, he's always right, David. So anyway, off I trundled to the beach. Well, when you get to Westwood Ho, I don't know if you know the beach, some of you may, but there's a massive great pebble ridge runs from one side of the beach to the other. It's all blown down from the rocks and swung out by the sea. You know, there's a great pebble ridge, and behind it is a kind of flatlands which are lower level down the sea level. And so as you approach the ridge, you don't actually see the sea. You can hear it if it's up. And this day I was approaching the ridge where I dropped the clothes and everything, going for a swim. And it was, as I say, it was cloudy, it was on the point of raining, it was windy, it wasn't really conducive. It was a Sunday, and days like that, you don't normally find people at Westwood Ho. You know, they're usually doing things at home. But there were all these cars there. There were one end of the beach, there were all these cars. And I thought, well, you know, that's odd, what have I missed? And when I got over the ridge, there were everybody in North Devon was in there with a wetsuit surfing. You know, the word had gone round, the tide's up, the tide's in, big surf, and it was quite a good surf. And they were all at it, everybody in this other were out there. So there's me, trundles down the beach in my trunks, the only one, you know, wearing swimming trunks. Everybody else has got their black wetsuits on. And the trick then was avoiding all the torpedoes as they came in, you know, surfboards and that, you know. And who's this bloody idiot? And who's your surfboard, you know? So, but the funny thing is, I don't know what it is. I mean, the word goes around, surf's up, so they must all go, because loads of the people that were there had obviously never been surfing in their lives before. And they got their surfboard and they put the surfboard down and they're standing on the surfboard in about 2 inches of water. Well, even I know that doesn't work. And what my lad and I have taken to doing is what we call body surfing, right? And if you shape your body in a certain way and you catch a wave in a certain way, you can actually body surf quite a long way in the beach. That's how it's supposed to work. You know, I usually sink, you know, but every now and again you catch one, and once every 4 weeks you get a good one, and you do a 3-foot surf in, you know. Anyway, on this day I seemed to be getting a knack of it because I was doing a bit of this and enjoying myself. And there were these 4 or 5 guys nearby with their surfboards, and after a while they would just stopped and they were just watching me do this body surfing in. And they said, "What have you got these for?" You know, obviously, these surfboards is not the way to do it, you know. Anyway, we don't want to talk about surfing all day, do we? So that's part of what I've been doing, bumming around up there. Now, as I said earlier, it's lovely to be back in Plymouth. It's particularly nice for me to be back in Devonport because I was born in Devonport. I was born right here. Well, not when I was born. No, I don't think so. When I heard that the con was in Devonport, it was, you know, a bit of spice to it for me. I talked to Dave Trace, who knows quite a lot, obviously, of the history of Plymouth, and there was an old Devonport hospital next door here, which, and I was born in something called the Alexandra Nursing Home, but we're not sure whether it was that one. The 2 old ladies on the bus, they assured me that the Alexandra Nursing Home was across the park and has now become the nursing flats and that, so I have to do a bit of investigating there. But yeah, certainly that's quite interesting. And my other contact with the city, of course, is the wonderful Greens, who, and if you can't find me after 2 o'clock this afternoon, and between 2 and about 5, you'll probably know where I am.
Yes.
You know, if I come back, you know, if I'm looking a bit glum later on, you'll know why. So there we are. Anyway, yeah, and I do come down to Plymouth quite frequently, mainly to see the Argyle. And having made contact again, I think it would be nice to. If I pop down and see some of the local guys, you know, in future, I'll be doing that. You know, now to re-establish contact. As for the format of the rest of all this, I thought at some point I'd like to involve you all in the discussion, questions, answers. That's the normal format that these things take. So we'll come on to that in a moment. I know that some of you have got some real burning questions. I do mean burning questions for me. I've been warned. We'll come on to that in a moment. So that's it generally about me. Obviously I'm a lot older, longer in the tooth, I won't say wiser. One of the things you do find about getting old, or getting older shall we say, I mean your mind does tend to wander a bit, you know, and you do get a bit forgetful, and well, you know, you sort of don't concentrate. It's a nice mirror, that, isn't it? Oh yeah, and you know, and you repeat yourself, you know, and you know, your mind wanders a bit, and you repeat yourself quite a lot. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then there's the flatulence, of course. Well, you know, and of course, when you're repeating yourself and you put the 2 together, well, blimey, you know. Occupational hazard. And in terms of books and writing, well, I'm still I wouldn't say churning things out. I do 3 or 4 short stories. I tend to work with short stories with different small press publications, magazines, mainly in the States, because there's not so many of them around in this country anymore. And because I've made lots of contacts over the years, some of them through conventions and that, and have met quite a lot of writers and editors through conventions. You know, I get invited in sometimes to do a short story, a horror story, or occasionally a fantasy story, and I have I've been working quite closely for the last few years with a small press in America. They're getting bigger, called Wildside. And Wildside Press, John Betancourt, that runs it, himself a writer, But John's he's a champion of all the old pulp kind of fiction. He's like you know, it's not it's frowned on by some elements of the establishment, but he's revived Weird Tales magazine, brought out new issues of that. He also brought out briefly a companion called Strange Tales, which ran back in the pulp era, and I've done a couple of stories for Strange Tales, one of which is Elac of Atlantis. Henry Cutler, when he was a young writer, he wrote some stories about sword and sorcery, kind of in the mould of Conan, who's one of my old favourites. And I was asked if I'd do a pastiche of Elac of Atlantis, which was quite good fun. So that appeared in Strange Tales. And I've got, there's an anthology coming out. Some of you will know Thongor of Lemuria, Thongor the Barbarian, who was a sort of a Lynn Carter back in the 70s, was writing some of the Conan stories, filling in the gaps in the Conan saga, and he decided to create his own character called Thongor. Thongor was a kind of hybrid between John Carter of Mars, the Edgar Rice Burroughs character, and Conan, with dinosaurs and everything else. And it's all quite good fun, you know, it's pretty lightweight, it's good fun. And there were about 5 or 6 novels, but there were quite a few short stories and novellas that Carter wrote, and I suggested to John some years ago that maybe they ought to be put together in a collection, and with a sort of a little bibliography and biography of his life, and maybe a few extra stories in that. And that's an anthology called Young Thongor, and that is due to be published any time now. I managed to get a nice cover for it from a British artist called Bob Covington, who's trying to break into the scene. He did a nice cover. I drew a map for it as well. I've got a fascination for maps, so I drew a map. Managed to avoid putting Bigfoot on it, like most people do, you know. And then, you know, so that's what's coming out. And there's also, back in 1977, I created a weird character called the Voidal. I've always had this, I'm sorry about this, but I've always had a fascination for sword and sorcery, and I was particularly fond of the kind of the edges of that, with people like Clark Ashton Smith, and Jack Vance, who did the wonderful Dying Earth stories, and also very fond of some of the fantastic art of people like Philippe Drouillet, the French artist, and Mobius. And I created this character, and what I was trying to do with the stories was do some new sword and sorcery stories, which didn't follow a set format. It wasn't some big barbarian comes in, beats everybody up, runs off with a girl. Well, it's all lovely stuff. I mean, long may it continue. But I tried to do something a bit weirder and a bit strange, and they are quite weird and strange. And the first Voidal story was produced as a booklet by the British Fantasy Society in 1977, and there will be one in the auction, so there's a plug there for you. Quite rare now. But over a period of years, I had them published in different magazines, mainly in the States again, 1 or 2 over here, some of them quite obscure. But we've published the first volume of them called it's called Oblivion Hand, because it's all to do with this hand power. And those stories come out from Wildside, with a very nice cover. He's made a nice kind of presentation of those. And there is a 2nd and 3rd volume, the complete saga, but they're not published yet. So I've done a bit of work on those. And there's also, I always wanted to write a novel about Atlantis. I don't know why, but I just had, you know, it's another one of those things that you come across, don't you? So there's a book called Storm Over Atlantis, which has come out from Wildside. And there is also one due out soon called Night of the Heroes. And I had this was one of these frustrating things in any writer's life, and I have talked to other writers about this, and I'm sure they tell you the same story. But there are times when you get your brilliant idea, and you find that somebody else has got the same idea, and they're writing. They usually get it published before you do, you know, and then the world says how wonderful it is, and you think, what was my bloody idea, you know? It first hit me when I wrote a short story. No, I had a novel in mind to do, and it was going to be called The Season of the Rat. And the idea was, at the time I lived in Birmingham, and you can probably tell it's probably still left its traces. And but I had this idea of Birmingham being taken over by a super strain of rats. You know, they sort of gone warfarin plus and all the rest of it. Nothing was doing any good. So there was this plague of these huge rats taking over Birmingham. Group of people in the centre of Birmingham trying to get out of the city to safety. That was my idea. I thought, well, that should be okay. And then I was on my way to a famous old fantasy bookshop up there called Andromeda, run by a friend of mine. I'm not sure if it's still going, Andromeda. You know something about that?
No, it's not.
I think Roger's retired now. Yeah. Anyway, Roger Payton, he was a smashing chap, because he was the one who encouraged me to write and gave me my first contacts and that. And I was going in to see Roger to tell him about this great idea I had for this story. And he said, always, before I could sell, he always said, I've got some stuff for you. I mean, that was the first thing, I've got some stuff for you, and there it was, you know. But he said, yeah, this one should appeal. It's this new novel, The Rats by James Herbert. And he said, what are you going to talk to me about? Nothing. Nah, that's right. I took this book home, and as a kind of a follow-on to that story, years later, it was interesting because Stephen Jones, who lives in London, an editor who does a lot of horror anthologies, the year's best horror. Some of you, I don't know if you guys have met Steve, but you probably know of him. Steve and I were friends for a long time. I haven't seen him for years either. And whenever he was doing collections of horror stories, new material, he always used to give me an opportunity to offer to contribute to it. And he was doing. I said to him one year, I said, "Oh, it's strange, Steve. You're a big horror fan." I said, "But you never mentioned James Herbert, because by that time James Herbert had written quite a few of his blockbusting novels. I can pitch my idea." And he said, I don't know if I'm keen on that. And I'd read one called Moon. There's one which was one of Herbert's better ones, I think. And I recommended to Steve to read it. Anyway, Steve read it, and he read a few others, and he got quite interested. And because his field was more editing and that, he'd done a book about Clive Barker, and he then decided he got James Herbert to come along to one of the conventions, and they got talking, I think, and cut a long story short, Steve agreed to do a book about James Herbert. It was it's by Horror Haunted, it's called, and it's a bit about, it's not a sort of a biography, but it's a bit about James Herbert. And Steve got different writers to do chapters on their favourite James Herbert book, if you like. So it was more and Steve said to me, you said you introduced me to the works of Herbert. He said, would you like to do a piece on your favourite Herbert book? He said, what about Moon? That's the one you introduced. I said, well, how about if I do a piece on the rats? And Steve said, yeah. And I said, well, look, rather than just do the rats, there were 3 of them eventually, because he really tore the arse out of it. Yeah. But and I did actually like, especially the 3rd book, Domain. If you haven't read it and you like horror, that's a great book. So I said, yeah, can I do a piece on the 3 rat books? And he said, yeah, that's fine. And so I did. I did a piece, and it was accepted, and it went into the book. And shortly after the book was published, I had a really nice letter from James Herbert, who I'd never actually met, saying, how much he liked the article. Thank you for it, and I understood what he was doing with his stories. And in the article, I had said, "Oh no, this guy pinched my story." I said it in a nice way, and it was all done. But that was a kind of aside to what I was saying. That the book that I've got coming out now is called Night of the Heroes. And Night of the Heroes, again, I thought, I've got a good idea. And the idea was that it's about a character who is given the job of closing down an old library. And when he gets there, there's a section of it, and it's got every copy of Weird Tales, all the Arkham House books, everything you can imagine from in the world of books and comics, first editions, sets, complete boroughs, the lot. It's an absolute treasure, And he's got the job of securing it and moving it all. But through the course of this thing, he's actually moved into a parallel world where a lot of the characters, there are 5 central characters who are kind of like heroic characters. There's a kind of Man-Thing type character. There's a sort of Batman type character called Darkwing. There's a kind of Conan character. There's a Wolverine type character, and so on like that. And without telling the whole thing, telling you the plot, it developed on that, and I was quite pleased with it. It worked quite well, and it was a reflection of my growing love for graphic art. I've got really into graphic art and comics over the years, So it kind of was this kind of crossover thing, which is quite popular in that field anyway. And anyway, I sent it off to my agent in the States, and said, yeah, like that, I'll do my best to sell it for you. You never guarantee. And I went to work shortly afterwards, and a friend of mine there who's very keen on the old science fiction and everything else, and he said, He said, have you seen the Sunday Times this week? I said, well, yeah, I got it. I said, I haven't really been through it. He said, oh, there's a great book review in there, do you want to read it? It's about this, and he described my plot, you know. The League of Gentlemen, it was called, you know, a new graphic novel by Alan Moore, who's probably the country's top graphic writer and various artists. So I went and rushed home, you know, got this thing out, read it, and it was so like my plot, and even had it actually had the villain in that was, well, one of the villains, the main villain was Fu Manchu. He'd resurrected him as well, and although I hadn't got Fu Manchu in mind, the climax, which is the kind of Lovecraft type climax, has got a Fu Manchu clone in it as well, just like that. So it was just as if we were reading each other's minds. And I despaired of the book ever getting published, but it is due to be published, I'm promised, fairly soon. So there are enough differences in it to make it a different book. You know, that you do get those kind of frustrations, especially when you think you've got a particularly good idea which might push you on a bit, you know, and then you see the book getting published. And that brings me on to other things. I did a book not too long ago called The Crimson Talisman. Now, I haven't done very much work in my writing career, as it were, with that's been commissioned by wargaming books, companies, firms, what have you. Years ago, I was approached by Warhammer to do, would I be interested in doing some stories for them? And I went up to Nottingham, where there was quite a big base, and I met a lot of their artists and saw the studios, and I'd not really been into wargaming, or I knew about White Dwarf magazine, I knew about Warhammer, but I hadn't really had much to do with it. Not because I'm not interested, but mainly because there's only so much that you can take in, and with everything, as you guys know, everything that we're interested in, you could spend 24 hours a day, every day, doing something, so you need a bit of time to eat and sleep. So I hadn't, but I was intrigued by it, by the amount of work and detail that had gone into the worlds that they created. I could see that they were very derivative, but obviously they were very popular, and I did like the art. And I mean, I'm a big fan of graphic art, and there was and to see some of the original drawing boards and some of the works that they do, and then to go down into the workshop and see, you know, battle scenes the size of this area of the room, full of warriors and all that. Fantastic, you know, that was quite an experience. Anyway, I did do a couple of stories for them. I found it very, very hard to work with them because they were very, very prescriptive. They didn't give me much latitude. They gave me lots of magazines and workbooks, if you like, and the gaming books. But I found I was writing and rewriting because I kept wanting to veer off and create something. I mean, the whole nature of writing fantasy, I think, is that you let your imagination run riot. That's one of the things I enjoy doing. But I was constantly being drawn back in. Well, hang on a bit. There's no such characters. There was no such race. There was no such place, and all the rest of it. And I thought, although they did pay very well, I have to say, I didn't last very long with them. I couldn't cope with that. And I thought that would probably be the end of my any association I ever had with writing wargaming or wargaming-linked books. But then, not too many years ago, I have an agent in the States, and he contacted me and said that Wizards of the West Coast, who I knew nothing about at the time, I thought there was something to do with Dungeons and Dragons, you know, I was vaguely on it. He said they create a new world, brand new, to celebrate 30 years of being a business or something, and it's called Eberron. And they want 3 novels. Part of the launch of this new world and all the rest of it, they're going to launch they want 3 novels, and they are looking for established writers. That was his exact expression, established writers. I thought, oh yes, you asked me for it. Established writers to produce 3 new novels. Are you interested? Well, there was a bit of money attached to it, so I said, well, I might be, yeah, okay. He said, well, all you need to do in the first instance is to do a 4 or 5 page synopsis, have an idea for them, and go from there. Anyway, they sent me a pile of bump. You always know when you get a mail from them because it's that big. Next day mail from the States, you know. So they sent me all these notes and ideas for it, and I thought, well, I could do something like this. So I put an idea together. I put 2 or 3 ideas together actually, and they liked it. And as it happened, it developed, and I, because of the wonders of email, I was able to communicate with the editor, you know, instantly. And I was given the opportunity of writing what was going to be the first novel set in this new world. And I was quite pleased actually, because I found out afterwards that they'd done quite a big trawl through various authors and writers and that, and you know, it was a bit like, it wasn't like winning the lottery because it was money, but it was nice to actually be chosen to do that, you know. So I felt quite pleased. And anyway, that turned into a book called The Crimson Talisman. Now I've since discovered, well, since coming here actually, that there are lots of stresses and strains amongst things like Warhammer and
Magic the Gathering.
And Magic the Gathering and all the rest of it, and it's a whole new universe which I know very little about, but I understand that through having written this magnificent octopus for them, I've actually transgressed a few lines, or I may have upset a few of the of those who know more about it.
Wizards of the Coast equal gits.
Yes. Well, in my defence, all I can say is I knew nothing about that. What I can say is that the one thing that, from my own personal point of view, dealing with them, I was given almost carte blanche to write whatever I wanted, provided I stuck, obviously, to the geography and the history and all the rest of the world. I could create new places and so on and so on. So although the book fits into their world, it is my baby. You know, it's not something that someone else has edited and re-edited. And the amount of editing that was done on the book was quite minimal. You know. So for better or for worse, if it's a load of crap, that's my fault. But it is an Adrian Cole book, I suppose.
The company's now owned by Hasbro.
It is, yes. It's actually, ironically, it is probably the best, I would say best-selling, but it's sold more books than any of my other books, you know, so it's done quite well. And there was a possibility of my doing another one for them, but I might have to take advice on that.
Just ignore it.
Burn him.
Just ignore
Burn
it.
him.
Because Magic the Gathering apart, the D&D stuff they do is very good.
Yeah.
If they're paying you the job.
Just
Well,
ignore Barry's slightly partisan opinion.
Burn him, he's a heretic.
Well, I have to think about it because I do have full-time employment at the moment. I'm for better or for worse, I'm what's laughingly known as a business manager in a secondary school, or Versa and all that. But I'm not too far away from retiring from that soon, and obviously, you know, my main drive then will be to take up and spend more and more time on the writing. And I've got a new project on the go at the moment, which is, you know, it's probably going to take about 3 years to write anyway, because it's quite a big project. I'm working on world building and the character, you know, doing all the rest of it. So if some little side project comes along, Wizards of the West Coast, and they want to pay me a few thousand quid for doing it, I'll probably go for it. Yes.
Adrian, we'll have a conversation. I'll give you the other side of the story.
All right. Anyway, so that's the sort of potted history about what I've been doing since Armadacon 4, and I've probably missed a few bits out, I'm sure. But has anybody specifically got any questions? I was joking about being here for 4 hours, actually.
No.
No.
It's going to be better here than watching the game. They'll lose badly, you know they're made to cry.
Have you ever considered putting your two loves together and writing a story about Plymouth Arcana?
Combat football.
Well, the thing about fantasy and sword and sorcery, I mean, I always take the view that everything is fair game, and that if sword and sorcery in particular has been criticised, it's because it's been too set in its ways and too staid. And I think, and we're going back to the Voidal stories without trying to advertise, you know, but going back to those, what I tried to do was burst out of the sort of the, you know, the tunnel vision and try and do something. And for some, it was a bit too weird. I mean, because it is a bit weird in places, isn't it? But you know, there's a gem of an idea there. You know, I mean, no, I don't think anyone's written a fantasy novel about a football team.
You can imagine
You could have a group of Argyle players searching through this mysterious land looking for the lost hero, Tommy Tiny.
Or searching for a way of winning 3 points.
Yeah, or finding a manager that will hang around for more than a few years.
Pardon?
Terry Pratchett's next Discworld story.
Yeah.
Well, I have to confess I've never actually read a Terry Pratchett novel in my life. I've never read any of them. So I would probably have to do a bit of reading around, yeah, because I wouldn't want to be in the situation of coming up with a wonderful idea and then finding somebody else has written it again. You know, again. No, well, no, that's possible. possibility, infinite possibilities.
I just imagine a goalkeeper who could cast burning hands might be quite useful.
Yeah, our guy's not quite like that. On a good day.
Yes, we've got somebody on the opposition who can cast fumbles better.
Well, interesting, isn't it? Because in the African Nations World Cup, they have an African World Cup as well as the World Cup, don't
yes.
they? And I remember a few years ago there was a fantastic furore because I can't remember which country it was, but one lot in the middle of the night they were going out and they were burying bones or something in the goal man. Like, it was, I don't know, something really weird was going on. That wouldn't work, don't wait. But there was something, and they were convinced. The other side were convinced they lost because of the curse the others had put on them. Yeah, whether it's because they had 9 men sent off or not, I don't know. You know.
Get a yellow card for wizardry. Black card.
So, any more questions? Any more thoughts on? I wrote some notes down, and I'll come to the end of my notes.
Still got another 3 in the house.
Well, from past past Armadacons, I've always brought a manuscript along to read, a new manuscript, and there's always been a certain amount of frivolity and levity and a bit of tomfoolery attached. I brought another one for you for tomorrow, but it's a serious one, okay? I don't want any giggling and tittering going on. It's serious work. It's called something like Shylock Dwellings and the Gobbet of Fur, I think so. You're doing it already, look, you're doing it. Nobody will take you seriously. Philosophical statements here.
Have you ever thought of actually just writing comedy?
Pardon?
Have you ever thought, because all your books are actually quite serious. You know, they're not boring serious. There's humour in it. But you don't write comedy, despite the fact that everything we see here is always very funny. I don't want you treading on Jasper's toes or anything, but
I mean,
there's still enough room for all of you out there.
well, Jasper would probably agree. I mean, I don't know, but it's a difficult genre. It has always been a difficult genre to break into. I think there's not a lot. I don't think there's a lot of comedy in science fiction and fantasy. Certainly, you know, if you go back 10 years or more, I mean, there were very few, and and also doing a novel. You know, I mean, I think yes, you've got Jasper, you've got Tom Holt, you've got Gary Pratchett, you've got other writers now, but I mean, there was a time when, and I used to find it, you know, I had ideas, but could I sustain it for a length of a novel? And short stories, the sort of short stories that the spoofs that I've done have probably they've been okay for certain magazines and okay for I mean quite a few of them were published, but they were not in, only 1 or 2 in mainstream magazines like Fear magazine, and that was around. So, and putting a collection of those together, I don't know whether a publisher would have gone for that. So I kind of I'd say I've steered away from it, but I've never quite come up. I had one idea once which I thought would make a good novel, and that was, and that's been done subsequently as well, of course. Which was my idea was that there was a guy who was a writer. He had a friend who was an American writer who came over to this country, and they went up one night, had a few beers, and they went up on the tor behind them where there was some old standing stones, and the American science fiction writer had been commissioned to do a sword and sorcery novel, which he'd never done before. And between them and the wine and that, they were trying to dream up some ideas, and they inadvertently brought this Conan type character into our world. And the idea would have been how he coped with our world and all the mayhem, because he just, you know, he wanted a woman, he would take a woman. If he wanted to do this, he wanted to do that, he would do it. And I kind of explored that, and I did talk to 1 or 2 editors about it. I sent a synopsis of that to a famous editor called Don Wollheim at one time, because I was, you know, going to do some work for his book. He ran Door Books in the States. But he quite liked it, but he said, oh, no, it's not quite for me at the moment. So I think if I'd got some enthusiasm back, you know, I probably would have pushed on with it. But maybe it's time to try again, you know. Maybe take it on. Certainly enjoy doing it.
Always worth listening to.
Tell my wife that.
Yeah, but she hears them 20 times.
Yeah, they hear me muttering. I've built this, going back to Bideford again, I've built in this large old rambling place of ours. Part of it was a commercial garage years ago, and I've built, it's quite a cunning plan, you know, because my daughter, who was at home with us for a while after university, said, oh, any chance of turning the bottom end of the garage into an art studio for me? Oh yeah, no problem at all. You know. So yes, I did what was, but I had to put a decent ceiling in it, floor joint, and that gave me the opportunity then to put a library above that, which is where I've now got my library, you see. So I got that up there and insulated. So I go up there, and if I'm rehearsing something like, you know, like the stories and all the rest of it, I can mutter and mumble up there, so it's a bit like something out of Lovecraft, you know, the old man in the attic. But they all say, if you hear strange noises outside, it's either the radiators or it's Adrian up there. Don't worry about it. It will go away. But I'm looking forward to all the other various things that will be going on at the con. I gather we've got some masquerading tonight and what have you, and some of the other things.
Well, you're going to be there for the start of the auction, aren't you?
I'll be here for the start of the auction, yes. I may have to pop out at some point during the auction.
No, you really, they'll just make me cry again.
Do you know, I suddenly realised why they've taken all the clocks away, so he doesn't bugger off during the charity auction.
You'll be so caught up in it, you'll miss the first half and you won't, no point in going.
Well, I just hope they're not as bad as they were last time. But yes, and I understand we've got lots of records of the previous convention, so that would be quite fun to see.
Oh, you've got to stick around for tonight's quiz, Adrian. You're in it.
I'm in it, am I?
Yeah.
Up to here.
Yeah.
Again.
I'm not going to tell you. You just have to watch it and find, and you go, oh, I go, what?
Well, it's probably this is what my wife was going to join me for the con. She was coming down, Judy. But a couple of weeks ago, she had a bit of a nasty slip on the way to work, and she did twist her ankle. She's bruised it rather horribly, and was trying to get back on the mend, and was hoping to be here as well. You know, because she would have enjoyed that, and I've had a chance to. Well, I probably would have taken her around to the Barbican this afternoon. But now that she's not here, I don't have to do that.
Oh dear, you're going to go to the Argyle play.
But in view of what's coming later, I expect it's probably a good idea that she's not here.
We'll record it and post it to you. You got her address, have you?
She's got a sense of
No, I'd go for American Graffiti and talk them in.
One thing I would like to do, actually, you're talking about writing that. As I said, I did say some years ago I'd never get involved with comics because it was such a big area that if I started, you know, I'd just get immersed in it. Well, yeah, I started and I've got, you know, I spend a lot of time and money on comics now. But I'd kind of like to do a graphic novel if I got the opportunity. That'd be something, because the sort of things that I write are very, very visual, especially things like the Royal stuff. So I will be pursuing that one at some point. I've got some contacts in the States, but it's becoming a massive industry now. The interest in it. I met Neil Gaiman. Are you familiar with Neil Gaiman? Yeah. I met Neil Gaiman years ago in London before he started doing comic strips, and we were both round about the same point in time in terms of writing, sending stuff away to magazines. We were both writing short science fiction stories for a certain boys magazine, if you like, or large or men's magazine, which will be nameless. But they were science fiction stories, and they weren't lewd ones. And we had the opportunity of writing, it was Pentas. We had the opportunity of writing stuff for Pentas, but if it was going to be science fiction, fine. But you know, I'm not really interested in branching out into other things. But Neil was like me. He was trying different markets, different things, and that. And he obviously cottoned on. He had a knack for writing comic scripts, graphic scripts, and of course he's gone on to become, he's probably as big a bigger graphic writer now as anyone else in the world. You know, he's moved on to the States. I met him not too long ago, and good luck to him. You know, I mean, it's great when that happens. And he's made a fantastic film, and he has produced some nice things. So I think it's a genre which has changed very dramatically over the years. And it's moved on from the kind of heroes in tights to what it is today, you know. And again, it's a field where you know, anything goes, any ideas, and there is some fantastic stuff. Not just the art itself, but there's some really good storytelling out there in that field. So watch this space. Well, time is moving on, isn't it? We haven't quite done the hour, but I mean, if we're, I don't want to sit here waffling away any longer than I need to. If anybody does want to come and say hello, talk to me, or ask me anything else about what I'm doing, or how the Argyle got on, yeah, we can have a lengthy discussion on that. Again, thanks ever so much for bringing us back. It really is nice to be here, and see you in a bit.